Hello everybody and welcome to another alternate country video. Today's country is going to be the Reformed Kalmar Union. If you aren't familiar with the history of Northern Europe, you might have no idea what the Kalmar Union was. So here is a short recap what the Kalmar Union was. Year 1397, a German commercial confederation called the Hanseatic League had big influence over the Baltic Sea, which the Danes and the Swedish did not like. After some internal war in Sweden, the Danish queen took over control over Sweden and her heir was proclaimed King of Denmark, Norway and Sweden. This was the start of the Kalmar Union. At that time, Sweden actually owned a big part of Finland, so he ruled over a pretty big kingdom. But the union did not work as planned, because many Swedes were unhappy that Denmark was able to rule over their country. So after many wars between Swedish rebels and Danish kings, the Danish king Christian II took over Sweden and executed supporters of the rebellion en masse in the Stockholm bloodbath. But after the Stockholm bloodbath, a man called Gustav Vasa organized another rebellion and was able to successfully take over most of Sweden. After his coronation, the Kalmar Union was ended. So basically, the Kalmar Union was an unsuccessful union between the Nordic countries. The new Kalmar Union would own Denmark, Sweden, Norway and Finland. Their flag would look like the old Kalmar flag. But how would this country be able to form? In Sweden there is a little chaos in the parliamentary, so while every politician would fight, the Prince of Sweden called Carl Philip would contact the military and launch a coup d'etat. The military would help him because he has promised them good positions and money. The military would target the parliamentary and other important buildings, and the king would have to depose so that Karl could become an absolute monarch. Because of this, they will get kicked out of the EU and some nations would stop trading with the Swedes. But soon Sweden would start to expand. In a meeting with the Danish second prince, who in the future will not be able to become king, they decide to try and make him the king of Denmark. But sadly for the prince, only a small part of the military wants to support him, so he needs the help of the Swedish. So the Swedish launch a surprise attack on the Danish capital, while the small Danish military who supports the king take over the ways in and out of the capital. The democratic Danes are completely overwhelmed and decide to surrender. After that, Denmark and Sweden send an ultimatum to Norway. Norway decides to spare human life and accept that the Swedish king becomes king over Norway too. After the coup in Denmark, the Swedish have stationed troops in Denmark. The Danish king does not like this and he tries to get rid of them, but instead the Swedish military take control over Denmark and officially form the Kalmar Union when the Swedish king becomes king of Denmark too. Because they're an absolute monarchy, they get support from Russia and together they attack Finland. Even though Finland resists in the beginning, they are overwhelmed when the combined forces of Sweden and Russia lands on the shore of Helsinki and take over Finland's capital. Because Finland isn't in NATO, NATO would not help them. The Kalmar Union would have a population of 27,200,000 peoples. This is 100,000 people short from the population right now, because I estimate that about that many would die in the conquest of the Kalmar Union. This amount of people places them on the 51st spot before Ivory Coast and after Venezuela. Because the northern country has a fertility rate under 2.1, they are dependent on immigration to grow their population. But many immigrants would not want to immigrate from a dictatorship to an absolute monarchy. So this is why in the future the population of the Kalmar Union would go down. They have a GDP of around 1,750,000,000,000 US dollars. This makes them the 11th biggest economy before Russia and after South Korea. Their main exports would be machinery, including computers from all the countries, oil from outside the coast of Norway, a lot of wood and paper from Finland and Sweden. They would also export a lot of fish and meat from Norway and Denmark. The Kalmar Union would produce around 1,600,000 barrels of oil per day. This is enough to fuel their army. But how big would their army be? They would have a manpower fit for service of around 9,100,000 peoples. This is counting with Finland, but many Finns would not want to work for the Kalmar military because they took over Finland. They would have 400 tanks and 9,325 armored vehicles, minus the amount that they lost in all the wars. The Air Force is very important in wars, and they would have a pretty big one. They would have around 500 attack and interceptor aircraft, because most of the Finnish Air Force would be shot down during the war. They would have 0 attack helicopters, but 160 other types of helicopter, including Finnish ones. Their navy would be very important because they only share a border with Russia, their ally, and a small 60-kilometer border with Germany. The rest are maritime borders which must be protected by the navy. They have 11 submarines, 6 from Norway and 5 from Sweden. They also have 13 frigates, 4 from Norway and 7 from Denmark. 13 corvettes, 7 from Sweden and 6 from Norway. Even though they don't have many of them, 5 of them are Swedish Visby class. It is one of the best corvettes the world has ever seen. They have the most offshore patrol vessels in the world because they need to protect Greenland and their big coast. But what would this country mean for the world? First of all, many people would die during the conquest of the Kalmar Union. It would be a bad time for democracy because 4 democracies would turn into one absolute monarchy. Russia would be happy because they would gain an ally. But the EU and NATO would be very angry and probably embargo the Kalmar Union and Russia. Their economy would go down because many companies would move out of the Kalmar Union. Because Sweden would need a big military to defend themselves from NATO, they would start to spend a lot of money on it, and together with Russian help, they would become a new military powerhouse. But please do not try and reform the Kalmar Union yourself, because it would be a bad idea. Thank you for watching, see you next video.